So Alex, tell us your secret and how you were able to program indie station Quad and were able to beat corporate stations in the ratings.
Good question, Sam. I guess I'm going to reveal the secret for the first time after all these years.
Awesome.
I think, and this may sound like a flashback, but you and I are big Beatles fans.
Well, who isn't?
Right.
Anyone with a brain, at least.
Right. I just started thinking about the Beatles. What was it about them that made them so popular? And of course, you can tell almost any story in 3 acts. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. For the Beatles, the beginning was I Want to Hold Your Hand. It was a very fun, energetic, crazy, innocent type of music. And then in the middle of the story, they started branching out into other forms of music. And a lot of that had to do with Bob Dylan's influence and the influence of other cultures, like
right.
Eastern culture from India. George Harrison started playing the sitar. And then by the end of the story, the Beatles kind of fragmented into solo artists. So, every story has a beginning, middle, and end. I just thought of it, okay, what was kind of the middle of the story? What was their high point? And many people agree that Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was their best masterpiece. Now, I happen to like all their, I know you do too, like all their albums from at least Rubber Soul on, and even before that. I mean, A Hard Day's Night was an incredible album as well.
No doubt.
But starting with Rubber Soul, that was after the Bob Dylan influence, where he actually influenced them to start writing more lyrically, to put more messages in their music. And so I just decided I'm going to program Quad like the Sgt. Pepper album.
Whoa. As
if, the whole station was Sgt. Pepper, without even playing the Beatles. We did play them once. You know that the song Strawberry Fields Forever was originally intended for the Sgt. Pepper album.
Right.
That was the only track we ever played by the Beatles, and we only played it one time in a special show, and that was from the Anthology 2 album, which came out in 95, I think, the end of 95. And so we did play a cover of Strawberry Fields Forever by Candy Flip, which is a pretty good...
And that was a big record, even in clubs.
Yeah, it was a big electronic record, which I just found out was actually top 3 in the UK when it came out.
No.
That was around 90 when that came out. So by 93, I had taken control of programming, even though I had the title of program director for 2 years at that point. But I didn't really get to make all the decisions with that until 93. Which is exactly when our ratings started to take off, and we started beating the rock station. We started beating the classic rock stations that were, they had overlap with our audience, and we beat The Point, which was the adult alternative station. They later became The Zone. But I attribute it to the fact that I studied the Sgt. Pepper album and just started using some of the attributes of that, which was, for one thing, all the songs were different on the album. Even though the whole album could be considered rock, and I'm sure there's been plenty of rock stations that have played that album from start to finish. Within the album, though, each song has its own unique identity. So I didn't want there to be cookie cutter bands and songs that all sounded the same. And if someone did sound the same as another band we played, I didn't want to play them. So you had the Seattle sound going, but to me, all those bands sounded different. Like, even though the press painted it as all one big dirtbag sound, I didn't think of it that way at all.
I agree.
They had a lot of ballads.
Alice in Chains sounds nothing like Nirvana.
Yeah, or Pearl Jam.
Right.
Yeah. for a while, Smashing Pumpkins had originally come from Seattle, and then they moved to Chicago. Candlebox, which was kind of like Led Zeppelin, they were from Seattle. But I didn't mind playing bands that kind of reminded me of the 60s and 70s, like Candlebox or whatever, because that was kind of the consciousness I was trying to bring back to radio. That consciousness of every song is unique, and every artist has something to say, their own message, and every melody, you know, is tuneful and is just different in its own way. So that's kind of the basis of how my philosophy was. And on top of that, as you know, the Sgt. Pepper album was probably the first album that really flowed from start to finish.
Right.
You know, because all the songs flowed together. There really weren't tracks of silence in between.
Exactly. Plus, even though you just said, and it's 100% true, that the album, every song sounds different, at the same time, every song tied together to create a theme.
Yeah, a bigger theme, a big, broad theme. Yet each song on its own had its own unique theme, like little parts of a story that all added up to one big story. And the big story was culture, you know, social consciousness. So that's what I really wanted. I wanted Quad to be a socially conscious station that had this, that was kind of like a puzzle, you know, with every piece mattered.
Wow.
Instead of just a collection of cookie cutter
That's
stuff.
pretty wild. So back in the mid-90s, you consciously
It was
used
actually
Sgt. Pepper.
93 is when.
93? You consciously used Sgt. Pepper as a blueprint?
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
Yep. Same thing that Steve Jobs was doing at Apple when he came back to Apple in 96 or 97. That was his philosophy. And again, I didn't know who he was till about 2000 or 2001.
Well, most people didn't.
Yeah. So, and I wasn't even on the internet back then to Google search anything, because Google didn't exist till 98. I wasn't even on the internet till 97. But I pretty much led Quad from 93 to 96 as the program director. In 95, we had our best year. We were one of the highest rated alternative stations in America at that time. And I owe it all to the Beatles.
Right on. And I remember the Billboard article on you.
End of 95. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
That was very cool.